inside the AFC South is where we're going. We'll make the tour around the division over the course of the week leading up to the season. We start in Jacksonville with Demetrius Harvey joining us from the Florida Times-Union. Jacksonville.com is where you'll find his work, and some of that work was running through the entire Jacksonville schedule earlier today. And I definitely want to get into that, Demetrius. But first, if you'll allow, if you're on and you can hear us very well, need to answer this two questions real quick. Tell me, who are these two gentlemen speaking that you hear right now?
Duval.
And?
They will elevate our ecosystem.
Who are those two gentlemen our listeners here in Houston just heard from?
Jaguars head coach Liam Cohen and general manager James Gladstone, the new brain trust.
What are your thoughts about the new brain trust in Jacksonville before they each go into their first NFL games this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in all seriousness, it felt like it was time for the team to sort of do a clean house. I know that not everybody likes that term, but that's sort of what they did, where they brought in two young, innovative personnel people, in the head coach and Liam Cohen, who's only 39, and then James Gladstone, I think, is only 34. So, those are two young up-and-coming guys who are supposed to transform this franchise. And I feel like from what I've seen throughout, obviously, since both of them were hired back in February, up until now, it just seems like they at least know exactly what they want out of their team. They have a vision, and there's a reason why they turned over nearly half the roster when it comes down to the 53-man roster. And so, yeah, so far it seems like they're on the right path, but, it doesn't really matter until the games happen.
Certainly not. Texans on their schedule in week 3. They open the season with the Panthers. Two big things clearly on tap for the GM and the head coach that kind of will play out over time. The clear desire to make it work and give Trevor Lawrence the opportunity to make it work. But I'll start with the question that rests on the GM's shoulders. He went all in this first draft and went up the board and took Travis Hunter, who is probably not 100% as the season begins, but will see time on both sides. So starting there, what do you think of that bold stroke, and just what do you think of that player's immediate and long-term future?
Yeah, it was kind of Gladstone's first kind of show me sort of move in terms of, he had the talk about being bold and the talk about, what he has a vision for in terms of this franchise. And he really showed it to everybody on that day to make that bold decision to move up, send away a first-round pick to the Browns and take Travis Hunter. And then to the Jaguars' credit, yeah, this entire time, ever since, Travis got on campus or on with the franchise, back in May, they had him sort of learning both sides of the ball. This is not a situation where they're kind of just throwing him out there on offense or throwing him out there on defense. No, he's in the meeting rooms of both his position groups, and he's practicing on both sides of the ball. And so far, that experiment has looked good. Obviously, we have to know what it looks like in a game, but they tested it out a couple times. They ran him in team drills. At one point he's at wide receiver, and then on the next play he's at corner. It's really fascinating to see, honestly. But yeah, it's a situation where I think that they're gonna just try it out, and I don't really see them letting go of the rope until Travis maybe tells them, maybe this won't work out.
The success or failure, I think, of the Jags, though, ultimately comes down to Trevor Lawrence. And on September 2nd, 2025, what does Demetrius Harvey think of where Trevor Lawrence is in his career?
Yeah, I think he's in that sort of middle ground spot where he's either going to sink or swim at this point. It's year 5, and he knows it, and he said it. It's go time. This is the time. You can't have a season like he had last year where he missed 7 games. You can't have a season like he had the year before where he was banged up to end the year and then they go on to miss the playoffs. He has to be healthy first and foremost, and then he has to make the right decision with the ball. Coming into last year, he was one of the most turnover-prone quarterbacks in the league. I think he had 60 turnovers over his first 3 years in the league, and that's something that, a guy like Josh Allen can overcome, but Trevor hadn't shown that he has the ability to do that. But with saying that, I've seen Trevor every snap he's ever played for the Jaguars in practice or in a game, and I really do feel like he's a guy who can propel your franchise, and I think that he can be a franchise quarterback. So we'll see if they have the pieces this year.
Well, I said earlier, it feels like they want to do everything to allow him to succeed. And I thought a couple of years ago when they went all in on free agency and all the money they spent on Christian Kirk and Ingram and the group they brought in there, I thought that was then. And then I look at their skill guys currently. So I'm curious what you think of that. First round picks on wide receivers the last 2 years. They obviously hit big on Brian Thomas, and the hope is they'll do the same with Travis Hunter, but it's clearly just year 2 and year 1 for them respectively. The two backs that probably split time, and then their group of tight ends. Do you think they have just an offense as a whole? Is this a plus roster on offense or much more middling or below average?
Well, I wouldn't call it below average. I think that they've invested enough in the wide receiver position, like you said, with Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas. I do think highly of Travis as a wide receiver. I think highly more of him probably as a corner, but, I think both positions suit him well. And then when you look at the tight end position, I think Liam Cohen has shown in his time with the Bucs, and then obviously Sean McVay has shown in the past that the tight end doesn't necessarily have to be a focal point of the offense. And I think they do have a tight end in Britton Strange who can become that sort of safety blanket. So to overall answer your question, I do think this is an offense that is a little bit above average, or it can be, but we really have to see it all come together. They shifted the entire offensive line essentially, 3 out of 5. Or 2 out of 5, and really 3 out of 5 are pretty much brand new. It's going to take some time, but I do think that this cast of players is probably better suited for Trevor Lawrence and his development maybe than the last one.
You talk about the offense, specifically the running back position, especially with the way they drafted, but also who's been there and who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. What do you make of that room right now, the running back position?
Yeah, that's a question that everybody has. It's a room very much in flux. I wouldn't, for fantasy football purposes, I wouldn't necessarily, select from that group just because you don't really know. By week 6, it could be Bashal Tootin getting more of the snaps. By week 10, it could be Tank Bigsby. You really don't know what to make of it. But what I do know is that all 4 of those backs have shown by the abilities, throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. We've seen Travis Etienne, obviously, for the last few years, saw what Tank Bigsby could do last year, but Bashal Tootin, his speed is very evident, his power even is very evident, and then LaQuinn Allen has done a great job at pass blocking and catching out of the backfield. If you guys think about it, with Travis Hunter being able to play on both sides of the ball, that kind of frees up a spot on game day. So I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if the Jags go into the game day with 4 running backs up.
You went through the exercise over at Jacksonville.com, the Florida Times Union, of running through every game this season. And these two numbers don't seem like they match up, but I think with your reasoning behind it, which I'll ask you to give to our listeners, maybe it does. 5-1 finish in the division for the Jaguars, including a split with the Texans, home and home. And then 8-9 is all they finished with overall, which is still doubling their win total from last year. But how did you rationalize that?
Yeah, I don't think very highly of this division. I think that the Texans, have shown faults obviously in the past, and the offensive line questions, and there's some extra questions with that franchise. But I think highly of them enough for them to split with the Jaguars or even sweep them potentially. But as far as the Titans and the Colts go, I just felt like the Jaguars should have an advantage. Daniel Jones in Indianapolis. And then you have a rookie quarterback with Tennessee. So, that in terms of the division, I felt like that was sort of more in a vacuum, in a bubble. And then the rest of the games, they can't get over the hump against some teams that maybe they should, like the Cardinals or what have you. But they do defeat a Panthers team. They defeat the Texans. I feel like that would be a pretty solid start to the season. And I don't think that this team is necessarily ready to push throughout the entire year, but that late season push could come. And it's only 1 or 2 wins that could completely flip it over to a playoff team.
4 of the final 6 games of the season are inside the AFC South, only against the Titans and Colts. So it certainly could play out that way. I look forward to hopefully catching up with you again this season, 2 matchups between the Jags and the Texans, and look forward to reading more of your work. Appreciate your time today.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
Demetrius Harvey, Jacksonville.com, Florida Times Union, our first stop on the AFC South tour here on the A-Team.